Action please.
9 years have passed since the brilliant Brit flick Shaun of the Dead helped launch the careers of Simon Pegg, Nick Frost and Edgar Wright. Hot Fuzz swiftly followed, and then Hollywood came calling. So, with world domination all but sewn up by the boys, the time has come to bring their homegrown trilogy to an end. A World's End.
What do we do? Let's finish our drinks.
Having already wowed Sky Movies audiences this year with his exquisite interviewing skills alongside Star Trek director J.J. Abrams.
Is this like the Simon Pegg show? Simon Pegg.
Good evening.
We thought it's only right to put Pegg back in the big seat.
Like I did last time.
Only this time he's bringing along some of his nearest and dearest to get up close and personal with.
We've never done that.
That's something we've never done.
So, with Simon and Nick lifting the lid on their long-standing relationship, expect no stone to be left unturned.
Did they say that I killed someone?
Our lawyers are happy to report, Edgar, that no murders were mentioned during this in-depth discussion. Just a no-holds-barred, frank and honest chat about movie-making magic.
Is that all right?
It's live?
Don't look for it, it's not there anymore.
Mr. Knightley.
Felicity.
You have a friend here to see you.
No, I don't.
Hello there, and welcome to another edition of In Conversation with Simon Pegg. After the sexual success of last year's edition with J.J. Abrams, I bring to the chair my longtime friend and colleague, Mr. Nick Frost. Hi, Nick.
Simon, thank you.
I guess we're just going to have a chat, which we've never really done, have we?
No.
We tend to communicate in text messages and rough grunts.
Yeah.
Can you remember when we first met?
Yeah. I think the genesis of our relationship came when we first went to the Genesis concert and they played their album Foxtrot in its entirety.
I don't remember that as well, but I will go along with it.
The first time I met Simon was at a stand-up show by Matt Lucas and David Walliams. Simon had gone to university with Walliams, and so I met Simon backstage, and I had seen him doing stand-up on TV on the stand-up show, and he was talking about like coming from the West Country and doing stuff about regional TV, and I said, oh, hey, I'm from the West Country too. Then a couple of years later, I directed Simon in a TV show called Asylum, and then we really started to bond over our first talking about Resident Evil, the game, which then led on to a conversation about zombie movies, and we both realized that we absolutely adored George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. So that's how our friendship started.
The time I remember meeting you is at a party in Cricklewood, 1993 or 4.
142 Cricklewood Lane.
142 Cricklewood Lane. Don't look for it, it's not there anymore.
Not there anymore.
It is, actually. And we met on a balcony, didn't we? Introduced by my then slave, Ronnie Jobson. I don't know, I made that up.
Lovely, broad Ronnie Jobson.
And she sort of came back from work one day and said, oh, there's a guy at work, he's very, very funny, he wants to be a stand-up. I'd been a stand-up for about a year, I suppose, on the professional circuit.
Now, funny enough, he wasn't there that day.
Who?
You met me.
That's right. By accident, I met this guy.
So I took his future, apparently.
But do you remember when when you did your first gig at the Cosmic Comedy Club in Fulham? It was a new act competition.
Don't look for it, it's not there anymore.
Don't look for it, it's not there anymore. And you did a very good routine, which I had on video for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Which involved the ginger orangutan.
Ginger primate.
Ginger primate.
Nick I met later, just before we were going to do Spaced, because Simon had written a part for Nick who hadn't previously acted. So I remember meeting Nick in like a bar and him being extremely shy and saying nothing, and me initially being very worried whether he could pull it off. And I said to Simon, Nick's very quiet. How do you think he's going to be in front of the cameras? But he was amazing in Spaced.
You will always be my number one. Then why are you treating me like I'm a number two?
Yeah, it was very frightening, you know. I didn't really want to do stand-up, but I felt that there was somewhere where I could use my hilarious natural comedy.
Undoubted gifts. I think that's the funny thing, though, is that you obviously had a kind of an innate gift which didn't have a large enough canvas if you will? I mean, you were pretty much ruling the Chiquitos,
listen,
the favourite waiter.
Out of the 10 male waiters, I was number one.
Absolutely. And I
was
think,
number one.
But there was so much more of the world needed to see it, rather than just, you know, people in Hendon who liked Mexican food.
Of which there are many.
Yeah, thousands, obviously.
Yeah.
This is about to go off.
Then I got to know the two of them together, and you know, on screen they're much like they are off, of just like best friends and thick as thieves, and so it's just a lovely thing to be able to kind of bring genuine chemistry that you get from ex-flatmates onto the screen.
This is a bit grown up, isn't it?
Yep.
I saw the boys the other day. Oh man, Stevie Baby, Adar Peter Drawn.
I remember the names of our childhood friends, Gary.
We had ourselves a little idea.
Did you know?
Yeah, we're going to go back to Newton Haven
Why?
for some unfinished business.
That's a joke, right?
5 guys, 12 pubs, 50 pints.
60 pints.
Oh my God, steady on.
I haven't had a drink for 16 years, Gary.
You must be thirsty then.
So, zipping forward years and years, after we got spaced off the ground, we did Shaun of the Dead, we went to Hollywood, Don't Look for Us, not there anymore, and did a few things there, and Hot Fuzz, and the time finally came for us to reunite. I mean, we'd worked together on other stuff as well, as because we did Paul and
Tintin.
We did Tintin together. We did the Box Trolls together. I didn't realise it until I saw it on the internet.
Ice Age.
Ice Age. Yeah, I'm briefly in Ice Age 4, and you play a lovely role in Ice Age 4.
Yeah.
Of course, I was reprising the role I did in Ice Age 3. And then it came to doing The World's End, which was always on the cards.
It was about making time to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, not just squeezing it in, but just enjoying the fact that this would be our last in this self-styled Cornetto trilogy.
What the hell is this? Why are we even here? We are here to get annihilated.
I'm glad we went away and did Paul, though. I'm glad that Edgar went away and did Scott Pilgrim, because I felt that he met a whole bunch of people on that film that became integral to World's End. Brad Allen, our fight choreographer.
Photographer Bill Pope.
Yeah, amazing lenser. But then, so I guess Edgar and I started writing it towards the end of 2011.
He kind of had the idea a long time ago, right? And it's a very
well, we were on that tour
simple format.
We were on that tour for Hot Fuzz in Sydney, and Edgar had that idea about what if you went back to your hometown and it felt different, like it always does, but the reason it was different was because it had been invaded by alien robots.
Yeah.
That was the initial pitch.
The initial idea came from the fact that I had done a pub crawl when I was 19, and I had only got through 6 of 15 pubs in my hometown. And I wrote a script about it when I was 21 that was about teenagers, didn't do anything with it, and then years and years later after Hot Fuzz, when we were on the Hot Fuzz press tour, it occurred to me that maybe what it should be about is the older guys trying to recreate something they did as teenagers. And then that tied into sort of bittersweet kind of feelings we had about going back to your hometown and it changing. And, you know, like, I come from a small town, I moved to London. When I go back and find a Starbucks there, I just react like it's the end of Planet of the Apes, going, oh my God, what have you done? And so that then became the basis for, like, it's actually like a invasion movie, is that the town has changed, but it's not just the passage of time, it's something else. So it just sort of seemed to kind of like the idea of doing a sort of a paranoid sci-fi really fit into this kind of like Friends reunion.
It is not the same anymore, Gary. And it's not that the town's changed, we have changed.
We had to be 40 to make this film, didn't we?
Yes, I think so. I think it was time. You know, also, good ideas like that, sometimes it's nice to sit on them and let us develop, yeah. And I think we have an idea which we could potentially do in our 50s.
Yeah.
Which would be quite nice, you know.
Which involves going on holiday for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
What we tend to do is me and Simon write the script, or at least we did on Shaun and Fuzz and this, and then like Nick gives notes, but then all of the actors rehearse it. So then other stuff comes out of that. But you know, the screenplay that's on screen is fairly similar to what we wrote, basically. We don't really do a lot of improv and stuff. But you know, but Nick would mostly give a lot of input into his character and how like he feels about you know, his arc.
you came sort of mid-2012 to sprinkle your usual sort of fairy dust on.
To fire it over the pages.
Onto proceedings.
We can go back, see the guys, chew the fat, it'll be just like it always was, except this time we are going to finish this thing once and for all.
You have a very selective memory, Gary.
Thanks.
You remember the Friday nights. I remember the Monday mornings.
Yeah, that's why we're going back on a Friday.
Why do you think none of us live in Newton Haven anymore? Because it is a black hole. It's boring. It always was and it always will be.
It's only boring because we're not there.
It's pointless arguing with you.
Exactly. So come.
Have you got any plans for dinner at all?
Tonight, we will be partaking of a liquid repast as we wend our way up the Golden Mile, commencing with an inaugural tankard in the first post, then onto the old familiar, the famous cock, the cross hands, the good companions, the trusty servant, the two-headed dog, the mermaid, the beehive, the king's head, and the hole in the wall for a measure of the same, all before the last bittersweet pint in that most fateful terminus, the world's end. Leave a light on, good lady, for though we may return with a twinkle in our eyes, we will in truth be blind. Drunk.
I think a lot of people have said to me, why didn't you write this one? Because you and Simon wrote Paul. And I think the simple fact is that you and Edgar wrote Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. That's one of the things, one of the criteria we need for it to be a Cornetto trilogy film. And also, I was very aware that you guys, you're kind of good. You're all right at it.
Thanks.
And I didn't want to upset that by coming in. What if I'd come in and helped write it, and God damn it, it was awful? I'd get the blame.
Basically, you were just making sure you didn't get criticised for having.
I was looking after my own back.
I think that the writing process that Edgar and I have as well is a little different, and I think people always say, "Oh, how come Paul isn't the third one?" And it's because it isn't directed by Edgar, and it isn't.
There's no cornetto in it.
There's no cornetto in it.
You guys on honeymoon?
No. I gave them some script notes, I think, on the first draft. But I was basically busy doing Scott Pilgrim, so I wasn't involved in that one. But in a way, like, sort of, that was never part of the trilogy because it's not set in the UK. So that was like an adventure in another country. And the thing that's key about these three films is they're all set in contemporary Britain.
I mean, I think there was talk briefly for one of those things that you have an idea and you love it for a while and then it just disappears quite quickly of Paul's spaceship being cornetto-shaped. A bit like the kind of last, you know, one of the little ships in
Close Encounters. Yeah, that little, because he goes, ice cream!
Yeah.
And he sees it, doesn't he? Maybe Close Encounters was the first Cornetto film. Think about that.
Hindsight, it's a beautiful thing. And believe it or not, when the boys set out almost a decade ago with Shaun of the Dead, the thought of creating a genre-bending Brit flick trilogy was far from their minds.
He's not my boyfriend. Might be a bit warm, the cooler's off. Thanks, babe.
You know when we were making Shaun of the Dead? You don't remember? Zombie film?
I fell off that bike and couldn't remember anything.
You banged your head, didn't you? Did you ever think that we would get to make 3 films? And did you ever think they'd be so stylistically linked?
I didn't think we'd get to finish Shaun of the Dead, if I'm honest. So, you know, I'm always happy to be along. I think once we made that film and it became fairly popular, I think people also say to us, oh, did you realise you were making a film that's going to be so popular? And I don't think we did we?
I don't think we even realised we were making a film. I thought it was a commercial for the first 3 days.
Giacomo advert.
Oh my God, that's rotten!
I'll stop doing them when you stop laughing.
I think when we were making Shaun of the Dead, we had no plans for the future other than, I hope this film is good and that people like it. So we didn't have a game plan. In fact, it's one of the reasons that, you know, we had to go completely back to the drawing board to write Hot Fuzz, because we genuinely didn't have another script, you know?
I think it was only when we did the Hot Fuzz press tour around America when people kind of, you know, carried us aloft on a chair and saying, film, that we realised that, you know, they were very successful.
I think when we made Shaun of the Dead, we definitely didn't have an idea it was going to be 3. And, you know, even the thing of calling it the 3 Flavors Cornetto trilogy was only a joke that came up on the Hot Fuzz press tour after the second one, as like a sort of silly joke that kind of stuck.
I think the genesis of the whole Cornetto thing, you can trace it back to Edgar had the idea for Ed to want a Cornetto in Shaun of the Dead as a hangover cure because he'd used it at college. Item 1, Exhibit A. In Hot Fuzz, we decided in this, admittedly self-indulgent fashion to reference Shaun of the Dead within the script by having Nicholas and Danny eat cornettos in their squad car, and the repetition of the line, "Want anything from the shop?"
Yeah.
Cornetto. Enter Chris Tilley, the journalist during our Hot Fuzz press tour.
Then with Time Out.
Then with Time Out, who said, is every film you're going to do going to have a cornetto in it? To which Edgar replied, yes, it's like Krzysztof Kieslowski's Three Colours trilogy. It's three colours, three flavours cornetto. That stuck, like...
Shaun being strawberry.
Yeah, Hot Fuzz being blue.
Vanilla.
The vanilla. Yeah, and then World's End eventually becoming mint. Was the only of the original flavours left.
Haven't they brought 8 new flavours out?
I have. I think they want us to make more films.
No.
Good evening, Raymondo. The prodigal son's return. Who's on the guest list tonight?
Come again?
The guest Eos. We, sir, are doing the Golden Mile, and you have the honor of drawing first blood. What do you recommend?
There's one. It's Crowning Glory.
Rather fitting.
How's that?
I'm Gary King.
What?
So tell me more.
What?
Crowning Glory, is it nutty? Is it foamy? Is it hoppy? Does it have a surprisingly fruity note which lingers on the tongue?
It's beer.
We'll have 5 of those, please.
No, sorry. Can we have 4 of those and a tap water, please?
What?
So if Shaun of the Dead was an open love letter from the boys to the zombie flicks of George Romero, and Hot Fuzz was an homage to an all-action Hollywood blockbuster, where did Edgar look to for inspiration when it came to closing the trilogy with The World's End?
Well, it's less of a homage and more it's like trying to write something within that style, because I think sort of a lot of the horror and sci-fi films that we grew up with are always about something. There's a lot of like those 50s and 60s like sci-fi films and TV shows that have then gone on to be very influential both in the UK and the US, but like specifically things like Village of the Damned and Stepford Wives, which is American British director, Quatermass, like the Nigel Neal Quatermass character, which then in turn actually inspired quite a lot of Doctor Who and sometimes the Avengers, the Diana Rigg one, of course. Diana Rigg's Avengers Assemble. Those things were a big part of my childhood because there would be ongoing TV adaptations of Day of the Triffids, Chucky, like The Tripods, John Christopher's book. It always made a big impact on me because there's something about that slightly darker British sci-fi where it always seemed a little less hopeful than American ones somehow. And it just seemed to sort of tie in perfectly with this theme of when you go back to your hometown, it's changed,
With the trilogy coming to a close, there remains just one last question for the boys to answer. What's next? The world might be coming to an end, but surely something as insignificant as that won't get in the way of this talented trio.
I think as friends, we're as close as we were when we were doing Spaced. And obviously, like, our lives have moved on in that time, and that's one of the reasons that The World's End tries to accurately reflect their ages on screen, is because I think it's kind of would be false to pretend to be 26 forever. And like Simon and Nick are both husbands and fathers, which like is a long way from where they were when we made Spaced. So that to me was like, this means just the 6-year gap between Hot Fuzz and World's End means that actually there's a richer like seam of material to draw from, because we can actually deal with the fact that we're not teenagers anymore. That's kind of what the movie's about, is like, it's actually nostalgia is the villain of the piece, and it's dangerous to look back, and you should be careful what you wish for if you try to kind of like recapture former glories.
What should we do now?
Now, with regards to the future, Nick, do you want to have more threesomes?
Yes.
I don't think I've had enough looking back.
I haven't had enough.
I'd absolutely like to work with Simon and Nick again. I think we wanted to make these films a trilogy so we could like deal with certain themes and sort of wrap them up. And so I hope that in The World's End there's some elements that we kind of have our final word on. So whether we work together again, I think we probably try and do something that goes in a completely different direction again,
I don't think this is the end of our filmmaking journey for you, me and Edgar.
I hope not. I have a kitchen to pay for.
But this is definitely the end of the series of films that we've done that involve being shot and set in the UK in a contemporary environment about conformism and growing up, and linked by that particular confection and a couple of running gags which you'll be able to spot throughout the 3 films. The next film that we make together won't necessarily involve those things, will it?
Yeah, as you say, I think it's the end of this, but I think to just say...
Do that Churchill thing.
Oh, do you like that?
Yeah.
OK. This is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning. I think that sums it up, doesn't it?
That sums it up completely. I think that's... I think also we're trying to wring out a little bit of box office joy from pretending we're splitting up, like the Rolling Stones do every 10 years.
Yeah, OK.
We are going to get to the world's end if it kills us. Welcome home, boys.